Hi, I am Hilary Davis with Touchstone Therapy Center in Vernon Hills. I am one of the therapists at our multidisciplinary clinic. We have behavior therapists, occupational therapists, physical therapists, and speech therapists, and we treat all aspects of the family. So we see everyone from littles all the way up to adults. We have kids counselors, couples counseling, family counseling, again, with the aim of supporting the whole family. And speaking of families, excuse me, my voice is giving out a little bit today. We're talking today about raising responsible kids and how to nurture accountability from childhood to adolescence. So, thank you for joining us. If you have any questions, please let us know in the chat. You can also email us after the fact. There's a QR code at the end of the presentation, or you can email us at info@touchstonetherapycenter.com if you have any questions from this presentation, and we are always happy to answer that. So let's get started. When we think about responsibility and accountability, a lot of times we're thinking about emptying the garbage, putting away our laundry, cleaning our rooms. They're task oriented. But what we're going to be talking about today are how responsibility and accountability, something that is a foundational skill that all kids need to learn in order to become successful adults. So when we're thinking about teaching accountability and responsibility to children, it's not just about completing those tasks or avoiding negative consequences. It's about shaping their character and helping them to grow into responsible, empathetic, and capable individuals who can navigate the complexity of life with confidence and integrity. These skills are invaluable for their personal development and their ability to positively impact the world around them. We're going to be talking about a lot of things today, but primarily you're going to hear certain things come up a lot. So I wanted to highlight those. And that is the importance in accountability and responsibility of helping kids make informed decisions, taking ownership for their actions, and making positive contributions, not only at home, but in school and in their community as well. So when we think about why are responsibility and accountability important, there are a lot of things, as you can see, and we're going to go over some of them in depth, and some of them we'll just kind of go over because we'll hit them at other points in the presentation. So the importance of these skills are to help children become responsible, self-reliant, and confident individuals as they transition into adulthood. We're looking at personal growth and independence, helping children to take charge of their lives and make decisions, fostering independence and self-reliance. And that goes along with character development, with qualities such as integrity, honesty, and reliability, which are essential for building strong relationships and trust with others. Excuse me for a moment. I apologize. I'm going to have to grab some water. So we're also looking at problem-solving skills. When kids are responsible for their actions, they learn to think more critically, make choices, and find solutions to any challenges that they may encounter. It also helps them to increase their self-esteem and confidence because they feel capable and in control of their lives, which of course prepares for adulthood. By helping them to understand the consequences of their actions and making informed decisions. It also helps to increase their empathy as they learn to recognize the impact that their actions have on those around them. Academic success, because we are talking about schools today too, it helps them to be better organized, be better at managing their time, which can lead to improved academic performance. It also decreases misbehavior and reduces conflict because kids that are responsible and accountable for their own actions are more likely to resolve conflicts more peacefully and avoid risky or inappropriate behaviors, which helps with long-term goals and achievement, and as well helps to contribute to society because kids that are more responsible and accountable are contributing members to society as they, again, understand the importance of their actions and how they impact the community and the world around them. So responsibility and accountability are important skills for both children and teenagers to learn, but the reasons for that significance may vary from age group to age group. So we're going to talk primarily today about elementary, middle, and teenage years. So when we're talking about elementary and middle school ages, which is about 6 to 12 years old, what we're really talking about is we're working on those foundational skills that lay the foundation for future growth and development. Um, in terms of personal growth, it helps with a sense of autonomy, self-confidence, as mentioned before, the ability to take care of themselves and their belongings. It helps to build better habits, and those are the things like taking out the trash and emptying the dishwasher. It helps with school interaction because it helps build social relationships by considering the feelings, the needs in others, and academic success, which, as mentioned before, has to do a lot with organization and academic achievement. But the one thing that I want to highlight in this particular group is safety awareness. Sometimes we don't always think of responsibility and accountability in terms of safety awareness, but when we teach kids to be accountable and responsible, it might help them with safety in the home, kitchen safety. It also helps them to make safer choices, like being cautious around potentially dangerous situations, being aware of the environment around them and others around them that might be dangerous to them as well. So it's one of those foundational skills that we really want to stress when we're talking about that age range. However, it changes a little bit as kids get a little bit older. So for teenagers, what we're looking at really is the preparation for adulthood. They need to understand the responsibilities that come with adulthood, such as managing finances, making career choices, and living independently. I will tell you, we have a lot of teenage interns that are both in high school and in college that work at our clinic. And, while parents are teaching them how to succeed in school and get good grades and think about what they're going to do with their lives, we've had a lot of teenagers that have come to us after they get their first check and they're like, but why is my check so little? I don't understand why they're taking out this money and what does this mean? And I find myself at times, and this is not to discount anything or any parent, this is just happens frequently at our clinic, having to explain taxes, what they are, how that functions in terms of what our taxes pay for in the government, and why that might still apply to them, even if they're young and not making use of those services at this point in time. So sometimes in the focus on graduation, what are you going to do? Are you going to get a job? Are you going to go to school? We're not teaching them some of those other foundational pieces as well, and teaching them the thinking skills so that if we aren't going over that with them, they can kind of figure it out on their own. And that goes into that critical thinking, which is enabling teenagers to make informed decisions about their education, career, and life choices. Also, we're talking about consequences of actions, and teens need to grasp that their choices have real-time consequences, both positive and negative, which is crucial for making mature decisions and avoiding risky behaviors. Whether it's not, engaging in risky behaviors like drugs or alcohol, but it could also be as they start to drive, and what does that look like? Or, teens tend to be impulsive and they tend to react. A big phrase that we use at the clinic here sometimes is we're working on responding and not reacting, taking the time to figure out what to do with those impulses before we react, because those reactions have real-time impacts on their peers, how teaching staff may view them, and slowing down to kind of figure out some of that and thinking about those consequences so they're making healthy choices for them and they're maintaining those positive relationships with their peers, which also goes into conflict resolution, career and college readiness, being prepared for the demands of higher education. What does that look like? We have a lot of young adults that come back to the clinic as well because there's a little bit of a failure to launch. They've done all the academic piece, but then they're on their own and they're really struggling how to manage a lot of social interactions or figuring things out, or what to do if they're struggling or having challenges either with professors or homework or navigating, kind of being more independent. And we can help kids with that by really fostering those skills when they're younger. The social responsibility extends to a broader community and society, encouraging teenagers to be responsible citizens who contribute positively to their communities. helping them with emotional intelligence to understand, again, their emotions and how those might impact others. And of course, again, going back to independence. So, if we really are looking at the definition of responsibility and accountability, what does that mean? And for responsibility, it's the quality of being reliable, trustworthy, and accountable for one's actions and obligations. It involves understanding and fulfilling one's duties, whether they're personal, social, or academic. And when we're thinking about this, what parents can do with responsibility is to really start laying that foundation early. The more that we start and we do that at an age appropriate level with different tasks, the more that they will build on those skills as they grow. You want to model behavior. You're going to hear me say this a lot. Kids are always watching their parents. And they learn by example. So parents should really demonstrate responsible behavior in their daily lives and point it out for kids. Hey, you know what? If I don't stop at this stop sign, I'm going to get a ticket, which is why I'm being very careful to make sure that I'm stopping and waiting before I continue on. You want to be consistent, which we'll talk about some of the challenges later because sometimes consistency is hard. But the research shows the more consistent you can be with your kids, the more likely they are going to be able to form some of those behaviors in a way that will continue on instead of going, hey, sometimes I have to follow the rules and sometimes I don't have to follow the rules. We want to praise and encourage kids while they're working through learning some of these new skills to reinforce it. And with that, helping them to problem solve. So I want to take a second to kind of think about this because a lot of parents tend to want to jump in and save their kids or tell them what they should be doing, teaching them what they should be doing. But when we're talking about responsibility and accountability, what we're really trying to encourage with kids is we're trying to encourage them to think for themselves first, to problem solve for themselves first. And I'll give you some of those steps at a little later time. We also will be passing out, we have a whole little workbook with tips for teaching your kids accountability and responsibility. And, if you put your email in the chat or you ask us later, we're happy to send those out to you and it will have some of those techniques in there. But when we help kids to think about it first and let them try and puzzle it out, you're actually helping to develop that muscle of critical thinking where they'll be able to do that on their own later, which is different than us feeding them the information and hoping that they're going to learn through feeding that information. What they learn is someone will give me that information. So we're really trying to foster them thinking first before we jump in and give them some more information. So how is responsibility different than accountability? And accountability means taking ownership of one's actions, decisions, and their consequences. It's involved in being answerable for one's behavior and their choices. So when we think about accountability, that's really saying, here's what I own about what happened. Whereas responsibility is the action of doing things. So for accountability, we are talking about open communication. And if you were here for our last presentation with the district, we talked a lot about open communication. So I'm not going to review it necessarily today, but again, in the handouts that you'll be getting, or if you don't have them, you can email us and ask for them. We have a handout that talks all about the steps for open communication, because that is important to create a safe environment where kids feel that they can talk about their feelings. Often when we're talking about responsibility and accountability, sometimes we're talking about it because someone has done something that they're feeling guilty about or shameful about, or they're having some negative feelings because maybe they reacted before they thought about it. And we want them to feel safe talking to us about some of those negative feelings too, so we can work through that with them and help them to learn the next piece, which is the consequences of their actions. And to understand that accountability doesn't necessarily mean punishment, but it's an opportunity to learn and grow. So a lot of kids are afraid of making mistakes. And part of what we're trying to talk about here with accountability is it is normal to make mistakes. I know I do this with my own kids. We talk about it at the office. Mistakes are an opportunity to learn and grow. Um, and really, that's what kids should be doing, both in elementary school and in adolescence. This is your opportunity to make all the mistakes and have the support of your parents, your teachers, school social workers, and other staff to be able to figure out how to problem solve, figure out how to make a repair, to try and change things, to develop a growth mindset, so that when you're out on your own as an adult and maybe you don't have as much access to all of these resources, you're going to feel more confident making these decisions. But a lot of times kids are under the impression that mistakes are bad and that you shouldn't make mistakes. So again, with my own kids, we always say your job at your age is to make all the mistakes. And so don't get upset and don't get frustrated, because this is how you learn. And we really want to give them that support and empathy, which is on, this slide as well. We're just kind of jumping around a little bit. So that they know that it is okay and that this is the place to learn from some of their mistakes before they make an adult mistake, which some of those are not repairable. And so when we're kind of looking at helping them understand that it's an opportunity to learn and grow, part of that is to encourage self-reflection. And you can have them ask themselves questions like, what did you learn from this situation? Or what could you do differently next time? And in that packet that I mentioned, we have a whole handout that lists different phrases and sentences that you can use for different situations to help kids reflect and kind of work on their consequence learning and problem solving abilities, and combining that with a supportive statement. So again, you're giving them a chance to grow. You also want to help set expectations early and have them understand those consequences, because it's hard to be responsible and accountable if you don't know what the expectations are. So an example like that, you're going to hear me use this a couple times with, like, kind of looking at a curfew situation. If, say, a kid doesn't know what the curfew is, or they haven't been reminded in a while, and then they get in trouble for missing curfew, they're going to go, well, I didn't know that that was curfew, instead of taking responsibility for that. So they need to know, hey, curfew is at this time, and if you're out past this time, here's what's going to happen. And again, we can kind of take that same example and go, how do we make that more of a growth experience? Well, if you're over curfew 25 minutes, then maybe the consequence is the next time that you go out, you have to come back from curfew 25 minutes earlier than what your curfew was, because you're putting that ownership and responsibility onto them. If we just punish, or we give a negative consequence, then you become the mean parent. And your kids are not learning how to be responsible. They're just going, well, you're mean and you don't want me to go out and have fun. Whereas if you say, gosh, I would really love for you to go out, I would love for you to hang out with your friends more. However, you made a choice last week to stay out past when you were supposed to. So the natural consequence is you have to come back a little bit earlier. And if you don't like that, then maybe we need to look at how we can follow the rules more accurately next time. So teaching, as opposed to just punishing, is important in developing that accountability muscle. And that will, again, help kids to foster their own sense of responsibility and accountability. And that's important. And that kind of leads us to our next section, because we're going to be talking about how accountability and responsibility helps to develop a positive school culture. So when we're thinking about the school community, it increases trust among the relationships within the school community. When students and staff take ownership of their actions, they build trust with one another, creating a more harmonious and respectful atmosphere. And when teachers model responsibility and hold their students accountable for their learning, it enhances this teacher-student relationship. Students feel more supported and guided, while teachers may appreciate their students, commitment to try and learn from some of their choices that they've made that maybe are negative. It also helps to promote a safe and inclusive environment. When we teach conflict resolution and accountability, it contributes to a school culture that prioritizes safety and inclusivity. Students know how to resolve conflicts, they're held accountable for their actions, and it becomes a place where all students feel welcome and protected. It also helps then with respectful relationships. Everyone has diverse perspectives, and we don't always have to agree with each other's perspectives. However, we can learn how to respect someone else's perspective and encourage empathy. So, when we're working on conflict resolution, the ability to hear diverse perspectives and be empathetic towards them, even if we don't agree with them, promotes respectful interactions among students, teachers, and staff. And it creates a safe space to be able to say things in a way that will be heard, and so that kids feel that they will be heard. Now, granted, there are times where there are certain things that are said that are absolutely not okay, but what we're talking about here are thoughts, or trying to maybe even think out loud and being given the grace to be able to talk about different things without feeling afraid to bring up your point of view in the school system. Because a school culture that's characterized by mutual respect enhances the overall learning experience, which also helps to decrease bullying prevention. And that's a whole nother, presentation on its own. But, when we're working on those critical thinking skills, the problem solving skills, the taking accountability for our own actions, you are less likely to find bullying in those systems because we are promoting more empathy and kindness. It also helps kids to figure out how to be leaders. In a positive school culture, students are encouraged to take responsibility for their actions and contribute to their community. And that sense of responsibility can actually help kids to have an emergence of that desire to want to be a student leader who can set example for their peers, which, when kids don't feel like their voice is going to be heard, or they don't feel confident in their actions, they're less likely to get involved in things as well. And also, we've talked about conflict resolution a lot. Conflict resolution is a life skill, whether it's in school or at home. As they grow into adults, it is a vital skill that they can apply to their future careers, relationships, and their roles in the community. So, speaking of adulthood, we're going to go through that a little bit more as well. And accountability and responsibility can help kids to prepare for adulthood by increasing their decision-making skills. When we understand the consequences of our actions and how that is a fundamental aspect of how it impacts academic performance, behavior, and relationships, we start to make changes in our own behaviors. We learn to weigh the potential outcomes of our decisions and make informed choices. And that is a key skill that kids need to learn before they go out, whether it's into college or the workplace or beyond, because there will be bigger things that they may have to deal with in life. And having those skills to be able to figure that out on their own is really important. When we're talking about problem solving, we're talking about identifying problems, brainstorming solutions, and evaluating their effectiveness. These problem-solving abilities are invaluable in adulthood, where individuals often face complex challenges that require critical thinking and creative solutions. It's one thing to talk about being responsible in the school system, but what does that mean when you have your own apartment? Or there might be health issues that you have to figure out, or you're figuring out how to balance your budget. Those are all things that when we're laying the foundation when they're younger, they're going to take those skills into adulthood. It also helps them with communication proficiency. When we're teaching kids to be accountable, we're teaching them not only how to be empathetic, but how to share their points of view as well as understanding the perspectives of others. And those communication skills are essential for success in adult relationships, whether it's in future relationships with partners, friends, coworkers, etc. We're also talking about resiliency and adaptability. So when we learn how to navigate conflicts and understand the consequences, we also build resilience. And adulthood often brings setbacks, as mentioned before. There's often failures. And a lot of kids who focus on academic achievement and they know how to get to that academic achievement. You do your homework, you study, you practice, you do index cards to rehearse things. they know how to do that academically when they leave school, but sometimes they don't know how to deal with failures in life. And when we see opportunities, either with their peers or with their relationships with their teachers or the schools, that helps them to figure out how to deal with some of those unexpected or setbacks or failures, which may happen in the future. And kids who have strong conflict resolution and accountability skills are normally better equipped to bounce back from adversity and adapt to changing circumstances. And of course, ethical and moral development. Every family has their own morals and values, and teaching responsibility and accountability can help parents to be able to um, increase the belief system in those family morals and values. So we've talked about why it's important, but now I want to move into how do you help your kids learn those skills? And there are a lot of things that we've talked about so far, but the foundation of teaching accountability and responsibility kind of focuses on three main skills. We've talked about some other skills like empathy, communication, and time management, and those are also important for accountability and responsibility. Decision making, consequence awareness, and problem solving skills are foundational. These are the skills that empower kids to make responsible choices, understand the implications of their actions, and effectively navigate challenges and conflicts, setting the stage for responsible behavior in all of life's various contexts. So let's start out with looking at critical thinking. And that kind of falls into looking at decision-making skills. So really what we're talking about here is that this is the core of the three. Parents really need to work on helping their kids to think critically, weigh their options, and make informed choices. And this involves considering the consequences of their decisions and understanding that their choices have an impact on not only themselves, but others. So when we teach decision-making skills, we teach kids how to empower themselves to take ownership for their actions. When children learn how to make informed decisions, they're more likely to make responsible choices. And decision making applies to a wide range of scenarios, from completing homework and managing their time between extracurriculars in school to more significant decisions later on, such as resolving conflicts or even adhering to ethical or societal principles. When we're looking at developing problem solving skills, what we're really looking at is teaching kids how to solve problems that equips them with the tools and addresses the challenges in conflicts constructively. It encourages a proactive approach to managing difficult situations and preventing irresponsible avoidance or evasion of issues. And I want to stop there for a second because, when we're talking about younger kids, middle schoolers, and even adolescents, a lot of times when we're feeling negative feelings, when we're feeling big feelings, what ends up happening is you want to avoid them. So that's where you'll get kids that the first thing out of their mouth might be a lie, or I didn't do it, or so and so started it, or whatever the case may be. And that's normal because as human beings, we want to protect ourselves from feeling shame, from feeling that we're being criticized, or from feeling guilty. And really, when we're working on those problem solving skills, as I said before, when you make the context something that, hey, we're learning and that's okay. And it's okay to feel bad about it. You should feel bad about it because that's what's going to help you make a different decision later on. It helps kids to avoid that evasion going forward. So both the decision making and the problem solving skills will help kids to start to build that foundation of accountability where they're learning that, hey, you know what? When you try and evade the situation, it gets a heck of a lot worse. But if we take accountability for it in the moment, yeah, it's going to be hard, but also it's also going to change the relationship. You're going to develop more positive feelings when you take accountability and responsibility, and it will help them to learn how to be more versatile and adaptable. It also will help kids to empower them to navigate a wide range of situations, from interpersonal conflicts and academic challenges and beyond. Responsible individuals are more likely to face problems head on than avoiding them. And then the third piece is consequence awareness. So when we understand the consequences of our actions, that is the heart of accountability. Children who grasp a cause and effect relationship between their behavior and the outcomes are more likely to take responsibility for their actions because they start to learn that their choices have real world implications, which motivates responsible behavior. It also helps kids to develop a sense of ownership in their actions. It allows them to reflect on their behavior, acknowledge mistakes, as we've mentioned, and take steps to rectify or learn from them. And this self awareness is key for accountability. So, like a real life example in this would be, and we're going to talk a little bit more about digital responsibility in a little while, is for kids, sometimes they'll say stuff online and it doesn't even have to be like, their parents were like, well, we restrict social media, or we don't allow them to do certain things. It could be texting. They could be sitting next to a friend who has access to a phone or social media, and they're saying something on their friend's phone. And it is much easier to do that when someone is not in front of you. And so when you don't understand that when you put something out in the world, you can't control the reaction to it, you end up with kids that feel bad. There's drama. They go to school the next day. People are making comments. Maybe there's, conflict with friends because of what was said. But when we're teaching them the consequences of certain behaviors or to think about, hey, should you put that up there? What we're really helping them to understand is to exercise that empathy muscle and look at, do you really want to go through with this if you know what the consequences are? So, like an example of how that might play out in real life is, I've told my kids at home, if you wouldn't say it to someone's face, you shouldn't say it online, as a reminder that, okay, it's really easy when you're online and the person's not in front of you and you can't see their body language or their facial reactions, they can't respond to you. You can say a lot of things that seem easier. But if you wouldn't do it to someone's face because you're going to feel bad about that reaction, you probably shouldn't do it now because you're still going to feel bad about it when they hear about it, when they read it, when other people bring it up later. So that increased awareness of consequences is something that we can work on, and we can find situations all over the place that we can use as examples to teach our kids about that as well. So keeping that in mind, this is all a lot of information. And I also want to acknowledge that there's a lot of challenges in teaching accountability and responsibility. We talked about it briefly before, but consistency is hard. Many parents struggle to enforce the rules over time. It's hard to be consistent when you're running around from activity to activity or sports or trying to get homework done. And that is a difficult balance to try and make. It's also hard to think about what's age appropriate. Again, we talked about it earlier. Tasks are better for elementary age kids, but we're talking about more complex things as kids get older. So you want to make sure that what you're talking about with your child is matching what their maturity level is. And it's not necessarily about age. We have kids that are impulsive or neurodiverse or have ADHD or a multitude of things going on, and that can impact their maturity level. So we want to make sure that we're not expecting too much from some kids and not enough from those kids that might be more mature. Resistance is hard, and no one wants to get into a power struggle with your kids. And so, certainly that's a barrier. Balancing independence. So, fostering those independent skills, like we said before, but figuring out when to give more freedom or how much is too much freedom can be a challenge. I've mentioned this before, and I cannot say this enough, avoiding blame and shame as a way to teach accountability is important, because when we blame and shame, it can damage a kid's self-esteem and hinder their ability to increase their growth edge and to learn from their mistakes. I've mentioned it along with the blaming and shaming, but consequences versus punishment, that's challenging. We want our kids to learn a lesson, but we really need to think about how to learn through consequences rather than punitive actions, because punitive actions allows them to say, it's you, you're mean. Whereas when we teach natural consequences or consequences for one's actions, if you spill the milk, someone has to clean it up. Like I mentioned before, if you run a stop sign, you may get a ticket. Those are just things that, are. And when we teach them to figure that out for themselves and that is going to impact them directly, it teaches them that they have to own those things. They're the ones that need to make choices. Patience and communication can be difficult. Obviously, sometimes we're dealing with peer influence. And so it's important that when these barriers come up, you decide if you're really struggling with them, seek support and guidance from other parenting resources. There's books, there's podcasts that we've tacked on to the end of this presentation. You can go to the school, you can talk to the school social worker. Sometimes you might want to involve a professional or a counselor or an executive functioning coach. But it's important to remember that teaching responsibility and accountability is a gradual process, and it requires patience, understanding, and adaptability because of these challenges. But when you build a strong, open, and trusting parent-child relationship, that really helps to address some of these barriers. So the next piece to kind of consider is, the balance between protection and accountability. This one's hard because we don't want our kids to feel bad. We don't want them to feel bad for a long period of time. And that makes sense. But when we don't put accountability and responsibility as primary, what we're really doing is we're not putting those growth mindset skills in the forefront, and they can be compromised. So again, accountability teaches the consequences of actions. Responsibility helps them to make informed decisions, and both are vital skills for success. So one of the things is parents can feel really overwhelmed juggling their own responsibilities and then also trying to figure out how to help their kids. Um, you know, Sometimes there's a difference in approach between parents, and then that can cause stress that might kind of impede figuring out where that balance is. Parents might experience some guilt over the desire to see their kids become more responsible, fearing that they're pushing too hard or maybe not providing enough support. They may be concerned about the impact that them teaching their kids accountability and responsibility may have on their relationship with both the child relationship with them as a parent and sometimes even their relationship between parents. And that can be distressing as well. So again, this is one of those things where if you're really struggling, that's when it's time to kind of bring in some supports. Again, in the handouts that we have as well, we have examples of how to create a supportive statement while still fostering that accountability and responsibility. Hey, I know that this is hard for you. I can see you struggling. And also, it's important that we're considering other people's feelings and figuring that out. And we're going to be here with you to figure this out together. That sounds a lot different than just teaching a kid something as well. So, one of the things that I wanted to touch base on is the how. And this slide here is really key because it goes through all the steps to how you can balance supporting your child and teaching them responsibility and accountability without feeding them the information, really kind of encouraging them to learn from that. So the steps are, you want to acknowledge the emotion first. So like I said before, you might say, hey, I see that you're feeling embarrassed, or I see that you're having some big feelings, you're feeling bad. You want to connect it to that action. Let's take, for example, someone who cheated on a test. You know what? If you get caught, of course you're going to feel bad. And of course you're going to feel ashamed when that happens. You're going to want to express empathy. Hey, it's hard when we make a mistake and we don't know what to do, or when we were struggling and we felt like that there were no other choices. Again, you're not agreeing with the behavior, but you're expressing empathy and you're connecting with your child over that. And then you really want to encourage reflection. So you want to really get them to think about, hey, what could we have done differently? Or if you could do this over again, what other choices would you have made? What would have helped in that moment? Would it have helped to go up to the teacher and say, you're not feeling prepared? Would it have helped to, ask for some more time if that's possible. But you really want them to engage in that reflection process instead of telling them what they should have been thinking so that they start to exercise that muscle on their own. You want to discuss consequences gently with them. Again, this is not punitive. There's consequences in place. They're maybe going to get a detention if they're caught cheating. Um, you don't have to reinforce that. You can just say, well, this is what happens, and we need to talk about that. Connect it with some real life examples when you're thinking about problem solving as well. This is what happens if we break a law in society. You may get arrested, you may get a ticket. And so this is why it's important now to figure these things out before you get to be an adult. And you really want to work on those problem solving skills. And again, then you want to finish that up again with another statement of support. I get it, it's hard, and it's going to be hard to serve in that detention, but you know what? This is going to be a really great reminder for you. And we're going to talk about what are some other things that we can do in the future. And we're here to help you figure this out. And if you follow these steps, it gives the quality of the interaction a little bit of a difference because you're saying, hey, I might be angry, I might be upset, I might not be happy, but I'm also still your parent and I'm going to help you figure this out. And when you figure this out, that's going to help you become a better child, adolescent, adult, because you're going to know how to figure these things out in advance as you get older. The last thing that I really wanted to cover was accountability and responsibility in the digital world. Again, another whole presentation just on its own. But there is something to be said for responsibility and accountability in the digital world. And even when parents, again, think that they're putting restrictions on their kids, there are hidden apps. They could be sneaking their way onto things. They can figure out your passwords. I've had that happen myself. And kids are smart. If they really want something, they'll figure out a way to access that. So whether you've put boundaries in place, whether you're tracking them or not, it still is helpful to go over all of these different things because it will help them to manage that when they do have access to some of those things. So you want to provide an understanding of today's digital world. It changes all the time, but what you can do is research and see what's out there, what the popular platforms are, trends among kids. There are websites that are out there that will help you to be able to do that. And again, if you tag me or you tag Megan Goldman at the district, there are tons of resources that you can access with that. You want to help them to learn by example. Show them what it means to be responsible with your own devices. You want to teach them about protecting their privacy and security and how to safeguard their information and privacy online. Give easy steps for creating strong passwords and using two-factor authentication. You also want them to be aware, like we have a thing that we'll talk about, don't use numbers, no social security numbers, no telephone numbers, no credit card numbers, no birth dates, all the things that help to protect their identity. You want to show them some posts and go, how can you figure out what you know about, what you're seeing through that post? If someone's standing next to a sign at the school and other people have access to that, well, now they know what school that you go to. They know what suburbs probably feed into that school. You want to be aware, hey, you think you're talking to another middle schooler, but let's look at the room that they're coming from. Does that look like a kid's room? Does that look like an adult's room? And these are coming from practical things that we've had a lot of kids who have had issues where the police are involved because of scams that are going on that the kids kind of fell into. So you want them to look at that and go, hey, someone's texting you at 11 o'clock and they say they aren't homeschooled. They say that they go to school. What are they doing home at 11 o'clock? And what are you seeing in their background? Does that look like that is, again, like I said before, does it look like it belongs to a kid? To really start to question some of those things so that they can verify the authenticity of who they're talking to. You want to guide your kids in posting and sharing responsibly, to really think about those consequences of being online. So when we're thinking about that too, we're thinking about their future digital footprint. The things that they do now live on the internet forever. And from my personal experience, kids think if they're using Snapchat where they delete something, it's not accessible. So teaching kids, hey, when you put something out there, it's there somehow, some way, someone can dig it up. And these things will be important to you as you go through. Maybe not as much if you're doing it when you're in middle school, but high schoolers, people who are looking, colleges are looking, employers are now looking at social media to see if they're seeing behavior on there that would disqualify someone from being considered a responsible employee or what value that they might bring to a campus. So you really want them to think about what they're putting out there. And in addition to that, there's critical thinking and fact checking. If I had $1 for every time I've had to ask one of my kids and they tell me something and I say, did you get that from TikTok or YouTube? I would be rich. So helping them to understand critical thinking, where reputable sources are, how to fact check, really goes a long way because at this stage of the game, they can be heavily influenced by what they're seeing on the digital landscape. Also, resolving online conflicts. Again, I mentioned it earlier, just because someone's not there in person doesn't mean that there's not an impact. And so helping them to understand whether it's within a game, or they're talking to someone on text, what does that mean? Another example of that would be, sometimes parents are like, well, we restrict who they're talking to and what they're doing, or we're checking this, but sometimes their friends add them to groups of people. And, it might be helpful to talk to them and say, listen, if you don't recognize a phone number on a group chat, you need to leave that group chat or come to me as an adult and say, I need help. Someone's on this group chat and I don't know them. And I know being a responsible person in the digital world that I shouldn't be sharing personal information with them. So going over that with kids is really important just because the digital world is such a huge piece of kids' lives at this point in time. So, just to review some of the main points, when we're talking about responsibility and accountability, consistency is key. Natural consequences are also really great reinforcers. We want to make sure that we're being age appropriate about our expectations and encouraging independence. We want to have positive reinforcement and be a supportive guide in teaching them accountability and responsibility because this will help them as they grow into adulthood. I want to thank everyone for attending this presentation. We'll take a minute to do, some Q&A, but I also wanted to let you know that we have an upcoming Lunch and Learn coming up with the district again. In April, we will be doing Raising an Inclusive Child. We are also always doing programming at the clinic. We have all sorts of services. We do parenting book clubs, we have groups, we do presentations. And so, come and check us out on our website. You can go to our QR code right here. You can ask us a question. We're always happy to answer. In addition, we have some resources for you here. And hopefully you can take a screenshot or you can let us know. We can send that out to you. There's some really great podcasts if you aren't the type to want to read books. There's some resources within the county as well. So I would check that out. I want to thank you again for attending and for taking the time to listen. I personally feel that this is a really important topic. We see a lot of adults and young adults who are missing some of these critical skills. And so taking the time to learn about this, I think is really important. And I appreciate you being here because it will only help your children as they get older. Thank you again. And if you have any questions, please let us know.